You are now live on YouTube.
Thank you very much. And as I was joining, I understood that Nick Howard was explaining the reasons the meeting is arranged as it is. Right, with declarations of interest. Or do you just go do the roll call?
Thank you, Chairman. If I combine the two, if that's okay, I'll do
a
quick roll call for attendance. And if I call your name out, if you could indicate whether you have any declarations of interest. So that's Councillor Britcher.
Present and no declarations of interest.
Councillor Cook is not with us. Councillor Crotch.
Present, no declarations.
Councillor Fisher.
And no declarations.
Councillor Kelly.
Present, no declarations of interest.
Councillor Lawrence.
Present, no declarations.
Councillor Leggett.
Present, no declarations.
Councillor Nurden.
Present, no declarations.
Councillor Prutton.
Present, no declarations.
And Councillor Ward.
Sorry, present, no declarations.
Thank you. That completes the roll call on the declarations, Chairman.
Thank you. Then we'll move on to item. Did we have any apologies?
No, Chairman, no apologies.
No. Right, then item 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of October. If we can go through, can I go through first for accuracy? Page 1 or page 5? Page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, and page 10. So, do you agree these are a true record?
Yes.
Yes, fine. Thank you very much. And so any matters arising? Or any comments on the minutes? No? Right. And item 4 on the agenda is the progress report on the environmental strategy delivery planning. I'm always pleased to hear this. It means we are making some progress. Annie, are you taking this?
Yes, I am. I'm going to share my screen, so I'm probably going to do the obligatory, can everyone see my screen? So just bear with me a second.
Yeah, if I can assist in any way, the matters we're going to present to you could have been presented by way of a verbal briefing, but actually some significant progress has been made with elements of the environmental strategy delivery. I hope you'll be pleased with those. There's certainly a lot of work that's gone into them, and that's why we've presented the report and then a more substantial briefing, verbal briefing in the present form. I don't want to say any more and steal any of Annie's thunder. We are also accompanied by Abigail Langley here, who's put an awful lot of energy and work into the things that you'll be seeing here. I'm sure I'm now saying things that you would, but I just wanted to do that by way of introduction if it assists.
Brilliant, thank you.
Anyway, welcome, Abigail.
Right, so just bear with me a second. So can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
brilliant.
thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
So yeah, good evening, and thank you all for taking the time to consider the updates on the environmental strategy. As Nick's already mentioned, Abigail Langley, our national management trainee, has worked very hard on the scoping exercise that's taken place to enable this presentation this evening. So this is very much down to Abigail. So thank you in advance, Abigail. Both mine and Abigail's role, how I see it at this stage, has been as caretakers of the environmental strategy. And so we've been filling in the gap between the adoption of the policy earlier this year and then the rollout of the schemes on the ground that will commence with full momentum once a full-time environmental coordinator has been recruited. As you will be aware, the government released a 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution on the 18th of November this month. This plan outlines the ambitions for the government's £12 billion mobilisation for generating and supporting green jobs, creating more protected green space and investing in green technologies. And Abigail has been working on a briefing note to update members on this plan, and we will arrange to have this circulated after the meeting this evening. Just trying to move to the next slide. Sorry, bear with me. To do it like this. Can you still see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
In order to establish the priorities and then the resources that are required to deliver the objectives within the environmental strategy, a rationalisation activity took place. So this involves scoring a really long list of activities from the environmental strategy in order to highlight the most important and then the most urgent elements. This then allowed a list of the top 5 priorities to be isolated. So these are as follows. So up at the very top, we've got tree planting and biodiversity. So the aim within the strategy is to plant 1 tree for every resident within the district by 2024. So this means approximately 130,000 trees. There's also elements in the environmental strategy about supporting wider biodiversity initiatives. The next point is around electric charging points, or EV, as you may hear me refer it to later on in the presentation. So the council will look to install electric car charging points at council-owned car parks. This timing coincides with a review on Broadland District Council-owned car parks, as stated within the council's delivery plan, and will be integrated into this process. In addition to this, EV charging points are proposed to be installed at Thorpe Lodge. Single-use plastic-free council and beyond. So the environmental strategy looks at how the council will become a single-use plastic-free council, both at Thorpe Lodge and at Carrabreck, but also extending this out to events that are carried out by the council. So the Marriott's Way 10K, for example, and the Community at Heart Awards, just as another example. And then the next point, which is a green energy supplier. So Thorpe Lodge and Carrabreck will look to switch to a green energy supplier, as well as investigating further opportunities on the grounds for solar panels. And then last but not least is a procurement strategy. So the environmental strategy talks about the significance of integrating green suppliers on the framework for the up and coming procurement strategy that will look to be adopted in 2021. Having identified these 5 main priorities, scoping work is now taking place to fully define and plan for them, and then to assess the budget implications and resourcing required to enable delivery. The scoping work is in process of developing a timeline and phasing plan for the delivery of each of these key actions. Aside for the tree planting, which I will come on to later in this presentation, the remaining 4 priorities will have 2 main phases. So these will be phase 1, which will highlight the actions that the council will take to demonstrate that they can be a front runner and lead by example. And then phase 2 will outline how the council can support and encourage the local community. So the first point, electric vehicle charging points. So the council, as I've already mentioned, will look to install EV charging points at council-owned buildings. And this will enable us to review the take-up, how popular is it? What is the cost? How effective is it? This can then be used as a pilot study from which the council can publish results to share with other partner organisations, including parish and town councils. The council will also provide advice and support for local communities and businesses who may also want to then install EV charging points across the district. This may be through enabling and promoting residents to access funding. There's a lot more about EV charging points that's been picked up on the government's 10-point plan. And I think in the next year, there will be a lot of information that comes out on this. So this is by no means the last you'll hear on this point, and I'm sure will be elaborated on in much further detail in the next few months. The next point is a single-use plastic-free council. Now, Abigail rightly identified this as one of our easy wins. As many of you will know, the canteen at Broadland District Council has already gone quite a long way in doing this, and we've got various recycling bins throughout the building. So I think that we can already celebrate a lot of good work that's already taken place. The council will then look to roll this out, as I've already said, at other events, things like the Marriott's Way 10K, Community at the Heart Awards. But then how we will support and encourage the community, we'll do this through creating blogs and information on the process, the choices that the council took to become plastic free. The council will also make this information available as case studies for local businesses, and we will look to actively promote the refill scheme. The procurement strategy, so again, I've already touched on this. So this is being developed and should be adopted in 2021. The role of the environmental strategy and the relevant officers within that is to ensure that consideration and weighting of environmental impacts are included when that strategy is drawn up, and that green suppliers are included on that framework. And then in terms of supporting and encouraging the community, it's quite a difficult one to do this through procurement strategy, because obviously we can't look to favour any suppliers specifically. But we will support the community by providing advice on how we did that through our own procurement strategy. And we can provide advice to town and parish councils on how they might want to consider that when they look to adopt their own procurement strategies moving forward. And then being a green energy supplier. Again, the council will lead by example by looking to switch to renewable energy after our own contract expires, which isn't unfortunately till 2024, but I think a lot of the work to get to that point can be delivered in the interim. We will also investigate further opportunities for solar panels at Thorpe Lodge and at Carrabrek. There are already solar panels on the top of the roof at Thorpe Lodge, but there may be opportunities to deliver further panels potentially on the bunker and possibly at Carrabrek as well. And then again, supporting and encouraging the community, this through disseminating information on how we did it, but also making sure that there's updated information that's available for local businesses and residents on how they might be able to also make that change and how they might be able to switch to green energy suppliers. So that's a very, very brief look at how the council can lead by example and then support the rollout through wider communities. The scoping work that has been carried out so far has allowed us to present to members this evening a timeline for rolling out the top 5 priorities. As you can see, from 2023 onwards, the work that is carried out to support the environmental strategy will be very forward focusing, or very out looking at how we work with communities, and it will involve a lot of community engagement. The initial stages that we're in at the moment are that getting our own house in order. How do we lead by example? How do we deliver these solutions? As I mentioned at the start of this presentation, I've left tree planting towards the end. The the tree planting target that's been committed to within the environmental strategy is incredibly ambitious, and it will prove to be the most resource intensive item for delivery. As a result of this, we thought it would be really useful this evening to ascertain member opinion on how to establish a budget to roll out the target of 130,000 trees. So option 1, as you can see on the screen, this will look at who might plant the trees. Is it going to be community groups, residents, or developers, for example? That could be a developer pledge. This option will then look to estimate the proportion of trees that the council wants to plant themselves from that overall figure, and how many might be planted by community groups and environmental action groups, and also through external funding. Once we've ascertained that information, so say that leaves us with, I don't know, for example, 100,000 trees, the council then can calculate a target and a budget by working on the following assumption, which has been provided by the Woodland Trust, of approximately £1.28 per tree. Now, obviously, we're not talking about huge standard trees. We're talking about what is called in the industry, they call them whips, so not huge trees. So arriving at a figure using this methodology will take approximately 1 to 2 months. So it's quite a quick method. Option 2 for members' consideration this evening is a more complex option. This involves a detailed feasibility work to assess the exact cost implications of planting 130,000 trees. This option will need to consider the extent of land available to plant trees on. So what land does the council have? What land might be available to us? What is the cost of land if purchase is necessary? And this will include some opportunity mapping. This option will then need to look at the location and suitability of land. We need to establish also in this exactly how many trees might be planted by Norfolk County Council, because we know that they have their own pledge. So this option here would need to fully establish, what is our planting commitment if Norfolk County Council are also going to be delivering tree planting within the Broadland district. Now, this is a difficult and quite a long-term piece of work, but can provide very exact results. And as a result of that, I think that using this method, officers will take 3 to 6 months to establish a budget or an accurate budget on this. And I do believe that is dependent on the environmental coordinator being in post, because I think that it would probably need to be driven by an officer working at that level. It would also be really useful this evening to establish a member steer on the driving forces informing any choices on the underpinning strategy for delivering the ambition of planting 1 tree per resident. So this will help to inform our mechanisms for delivery. So the rationale may be, for example, a carbon capture, is that the rationale behind planting 1 tree per resident? So that might inform our decision on selecting trees which grow quickly. So this is very different to planting trees for biodiversity reasons. So for planting trees for biodiversity reasons, you might like to select a wide range of native trees. Planting trees for carbon capture, maybe just selecting trees that grow very quickly, but selecting maybe 1 or 2 tree species. A tree like eucalyptus, for example, grows very quickly, but might not be great for biodiversity. So it'd be really great to get a member steer on this evening. And then the other option, or it's not an option, the other point for consideration is obviously environmental action and community engagement. So is part of the tree planting aim to engage with our communities and to foster that sense of community activism among the community in Broadland. And despite the many challenges that have been faced by the events of 2020, there have been some early wins that have helped to reach some of the objectives contained within the environmental strategy. So I thought it would be useful to bring that to members this evening. So So this year, 500 trees have been planted at Newman Road Woods in Rackheath. Subject to Cabinet approval, the Infrastructure Investment Fund through the Greater Norwich Growth Board has agreed to fund biodiversity enhancements along the Broadland District Council owned and managed sections of the Bure Valley Railway. Broadland District Council have funded 1,219 trees to be planted by the independent tree wardens, delivered via Broadland's independent tree warden network, which has been coordinated brilliantly by John Fleetwood. And then 15 very large standard trees have been planted on Broadland District Council's own public open spaces. And then, of course, running alongside the delivery of the environmental strategy, we all know that there needs to be strong communication and outreach. And so it is therefore proposed that elements of the following may be introduced in the future to support the environmental strategy. So it would be good to have a goal thermometer on our website or on a landing page for the environmental strategy that updates the amount of trees that have been planted. So at the moment, you know, we've got this 500 figure, we've got this figure from the tree wardens, but it'd be good to celebrate that. It'd be good to recognise that somewhere. Broadland District Council will look to host planting events and BioBlitz activities at the Country Park. So as many of you know, Broadland District Council purchased a country park at the end of 2019. And I know that Abigail and my colleague Sarah Burston are looking to roll out some activities such as BioBlitz, but it'd be good to carry out more of those activities in the coming years, as well as staff volunteer days at Broadland District Council owned sites. It'd be good to advertise opportunities for local schools and businesses to get involved in planting, but also to fund plaques, so environmental excellence plaques to show, you know, this organisation planted X amount of trees, or this organisation supported the delivery of trees. So those sorts of engagements. And then strengthening links with community groups and environmental organisations to promote our collective goals. We've got some really great stakeholders out there. We've got some great people who support us. We've worked with Norfolk Wildlife Trust at the new country park at Horsford and Felthorpe. It'd be good to roll out further work with them, as well as work with Norfolk County Council, but also the Tree Warden Network and our town and parish councils. And then I'm sure you've heard enough from me this evening. So to draw a conclusion to this presentation, I would summarise that the next steps for officers are to recruit an environmental coordinator. Now we've got a job description in place, and funding for that post has been secured. So now that recruitment needs to take place. And the role of that coordinator will be to deliver the main objectives of the environmental strategy. The next step is then to secure the funding, which is the resource to deliver the 5 main objectives. And that would look to be secured in the financial year 2022 to 2023. And then lastly, to continue to develop relationships with our external stakeholders. So as I've already mentioned, Norfolk Wildlife Trust, Norfolk County Council, the Tree Wardens, and I can go on. And then very lastly, where member view would be useful. So where it'd be useful this evening to ascertain opinion would be, what is the member steer on the budgeting options for the tree planting scheme? Which option would you prefer to see us go down in order to ascertain that budget? It'd be good to get member opinion on the intention for tree planting. Is it carbon capture? Is it for biodiversity improvement? Or is it for community engagement? Or is it indeed all 3 of those options? And then lastly, guidance on the 5 main objectives. Is that what you want? I hope that we've managed to present to you something that summarises the objectives of the environmental strategy. So it'd be good to seek some feedback from you. So yeah, lastly, I'd like to say thank you to Abigail for all her support on this. I couldn't have done it without her. And thank you for your time this evening. And I'd welcome any further questions.
Right. Thank you, Annie. Right.
Sorry, Councillor Kelly had a question.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you very much, Annie. Firstly, I'd like to say what a nice, easy, readable presentation that is, and that's really fantastic, I think. Compliments to both you and your other lady for producing this. Just like to make a few comments about this. I noticed the priorities of working with the county council. What I have to say is Tavern, who I represent, actually have a woodland trust committee there, and we have not only Broadland land, but quite a lot of parish land as well, with lots of trees. I'd really like to ensure that, you know, we take on the town and parishes who have woodland committees and the rest of it, to find out their thoughts on it and liaise with them. And exactly, is it only going to be planted on Broadland land, or are you going to do with the parishes or whatever? Are we going to look at developers as well to say, you know, we've got trees there, we can do anything like that? So if you could take note of that. I have to say, you did mention eucalyptus and that lot. I have to say, where in my neck of the woods here, we do not have alien species of trees. We try to plant native species of trees, and I think we should be doing that. We've lost millions of trees over the years, and I think we should try and ensure that we replant what is native to our nation. At the present moment, you're talking about the country park, and I think that's a fantastic idea. I'd just like to mention as well that going right alongside that is going to be Tavern Park, of where there's going to be 1,400 houses on a huge development alongside of it. And I'd like to see us work with the developers to ensure that, you know, we have good coverage both through the plantation and into the adjoining land. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. John Ward.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I think the easiest way to get these 130,000 trees planted is by the developers. We've got some huge developments coming up. I think if you work with the planning department and make sure that is a priority for all these developments, including the ones that have already been given permission, we could go back to them and try and get more trees planted there. But it's not just, if we plant them ourselves, it's not just a matter of planting them. You know, I know a certain area where lots of trees were planted in the spring and they were just left, and they virtually all died over the summer because they weren't looked after. So if we plant trees, we need to look after them, water them for a while into the future, I think. And you talk about working with Norfolk County Council. Norfolk County Council have got a target of 1 million trees. I forget how many years it was, whether it was over 5 or 10 years, but their target is to plant 1 million trees. I don't know how they're getting on with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to come on back on that, Councillor Ward, I totally agree, and I think that we shouldn't lose sight of how complicated tree planting is. In some ways, it's very simple. You provide someone with a tree and they plant it, but actually, when it comes to large scale planting schemes, it isn't as straightforward as you bung a tree in the ground and you leave it. That is absolutely something that needs to be considered. I think you also mentioned working with developers. I've already had early discussions with Tracy Lincoln and Helen Mellors about the potential to work on a developer pledge, a tree planting pledge for developers. So I certainly think that is one way of delivering it, but whether that will deliver native broadleaf trees or more, ornamental tree species, then I'm not sure. So I think that's also something to consider in that. But yeah.
Right. Sue Prutton, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Annie, for an interesting presentation. One line in your presentation on one screen, you jumped around. Please, can you tell us a little bit more about the conservation grazing on the country park?
Yes, I can. So for those of you who aren't aware, the country park project was something that I'd sort of worked on. Well, it was actually my main project until earlier this year when Sarah Burston, who's now the project coordinator, took on. So in 2019, December 2019, we purchased what was called Howan Plantation, and it's going through a renaming process, which is why I haven't given it a specific name today. So that's 56 hectares of fenland, woodland, we've got marshland, heath, plantation woodland and native broadleaf woodland. As part of a higher level stewardship scheme, a large part of the site was the plantation woodland was removed and it was restored to heathland. And that was done, I think, in 2015. So the work that we've been involved in is fencing the heathland areas off and then reintroducing native cattle to graze the heathland areas to maintain that specific habitat. So it's not actually about tree planting, but it's about being very proactive in trying to deliver environmental outcomes, and actually quite brave in some ways. I'm not sure how many district councils have got cattle grazing on their land. So that's been quite an exciting project. And unfortunately, because of lockdown, we haven't been able to necessarily celebrate it and advertise it in a way that I would have liked to. But when you are able to, and the cattle are back on because they've come off for the winter, then I do encourage you all to head down to the site and see them there, because it really is a delight. Nightjars have returned to that site, and all sorts of ground nesting birds. So it's been a really, really exciting project to be involved in. And yeah, I've been really really honoured to be involved in that project.
Are the cattle belonging to other farmers and we just rent the land out to them, or what? Or are they our cattle?
They're not our cattle, not yet. We have a grazing license in place. So we have a grazier who has a fleet of red poll cattle. And so that's carried out under a grazing license, which will be reviewed in 6 months' time. So that's the current arrangement.
Thank you. That's very interesting, and congratulations. Thank you. Love the sound of the night jars.
Right, David Britcher, next on the list.
Excellent presentation. Really like the ideas and everything. Good way forward. Just got one problem that I'd like to see. You've sort of given some ways of funding and making sure that things can actually, which ways to go, but the ongoing costs. I always look to make sure that everything has got to be going in. Some of the trees that you've got to plant have got to still be in their shorts for 100 years. But as things go, as they get older, there'll be management costs, and there'll be management costs in the first 100 years anyway. Where do we see the potential for actually funding the management costs going forward? Yes, taking council awards thing. There's in Helsden on the allotment, there's actually a parish orchard, and a lot of the trees did actually dry out over the summer. There is an ongoing cost. How do we actually fund that? Because if you put 130,000 trees into Broadland, and some of them are by developers, what powers and control have we got to make sure that they've got to be managed so that the local communities don't suddenly get 5,000-10,000 trees put in their area and they've got to pick up a precept cost to actually manage them going forward? That concerns me a great deal, because it's just you need a turnkey solution for the actual ongoing in the future, not just get the trees in, but you actually got to look at them in fullness of time as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. I was in my role previous to this, I was involved in managing Broadland District Council's woodlands, so I'm obviously aware of the ongoing maintenance costs of managing those spaces. I mean, at the moment, that hasn't been considered within the scope of this report, and I think that once we have an idea of how and where the trees are going to be rolled out, very much at that stage, we then need to start legacy planning for how we're going to carry on maintaining it. I think at the moment, because we don't necessarily have an answer of where they're going to be planted, it's hard to then say what that ongoing maintenance costs with. Now, I'll draw an example, and it is just an example, so don't hold me on this, but hypothetically, if Broadland planted trees on all of their open spaces and they then encouraged parish councils to plant trees on all of their open spaces, this is hypothetical, that's quite resource intensive because all those trees are publicly accessible. There's risks from those trees. They're going to need a lot of ongoing management and maintenance. If, for example, Broadland bought an area of land that was adjacent to woodland or in a more rural area and planted native trees that were in a native setting and might be able to naturally regenerate and were better suited to that environment, that cost might be lower in the long term, but the upfront cost of acquiring the land might be more expensive. So I think what I'm trying to say in a very long-winded way, Councillor Butcher, is that at the moment, it's hard to establish what that ongoing maintenance cost is because we don't yet know how we're going to deliver it. But I think once we've ascertained the strategy for delivering those trees, then we can then start to fully consider the ongoing cost. But it does absolutely need to be considered, and I fully take that point on. So thank you.
Terry Munro.
Hello, good evening. Just it's a quick observation. Annie, you and I have worked together before. What may be able to assist with free of charge planting, if you like, is making use of the agreement we have with the rehabilitation teams for probation and working for those that are on community sort of rehabilitation orders or community service orders. They're always very interested in things that, especially where the younger people are concerned, where they may actually learn skills and also sort of learn information. So link in with me there, because that would bring that down to a zero cost in effect. It may assist us, it may not, but it's an option.
Sure. Yes, thank you for that, Terry. Grant.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, a very good, very helpful report. And I'm also very pleased to hear about the positive outcome of the conversations you've had with the Tree Wardens Network. So that was very pleasing. With regards to developers and having a commitment from them, I just wonder whether that's going to have that kind of impact that we need out there in the rural areas, because I represent well, I think it's land-wise probably the largest ward in Broadland, and I would love to see a whole raft of trees going up into my area, but I see some kind of a restriction on what kind of development is actually going to take place in the Marshes ward. So I agree that developers would be an element, but I wouldn't rely too much on the developers having such a commitment to planting trees in the rural areas. The other comment I just wanted to make was I was a little concerned about cattle grazing. I understood that cattle and their belching was harmful for the environment, so I'm just wondering about that. And then the third thing that I wanted to just raise was we had a few years ago that residents could actually go and collect some crocus bulbs from nurseries around the district, and I wonder whether it would be possible to have something similar where residents could go and around within maybe a particular period of time, that you could have, say, 20,000 trees available, that the residents could actually go and select or should I say, go and pick out a particular tree from a restricted variety. And of course, one of those variety of trees that they could pick could include something like a fruit tree, or a deciduous, or a evergreen tree, or whatever. But the the trees that they can select are those that the council can A, afford, and B, are in accordance with what the council's ambitions are with regards to getting a particular type of tree. Like you talk about a broadleaf tree, I don't know the difference between a broadleaf and a narrow leaf tree, whether they're going to have the same kind of effect on the environment. But yes, that's just something that I would think maybe you can take into account when deciding how you're going to go about it. So thanks, Chairman. That's all my comments.
Thank you, Grant. And Adrian?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, great report, Annie. Thank you. I'm not going to repeat a lot of what people have said, but I think it is around the cost benefit for me. You know, we want to look at the green agenda and we want to deliver on it, but it's got to make sure that the ongoing costs, as other members have said here, and I think, you know, as Councillor Ward said, to get developers involved to help it. I think there's a lot that we can get the community to buy into this, because then it gets everybody involved. And I think, so looking at the difference between the two options of 1 and 2, we're talking 1 to 2 months or 3 to 6 months. We're not talking years down the road on some of the stuff that you've put in there. So I think the feasibility study ought to be done on this to give us the full benefits of each option and to make sure that the ongoing costs are factored into this so that we really know what we're getting into. Great idea, but let's make sure that we know the ongoing cost to us for this. And I think the other part to that, which is outside of the trees, which, again, some great stuff around green energy suppliers. And again, I appreciate this is further down the road. But again, the same principles apply for me for that whilst they're all great initiatives, we also need to make sure that we are delivering value for our residents and to make sure that just by going down a green agenda for energy suppliers, that we are not delivering a poor value to our residents just for the sake of the green agenda. So just some cost comparisons and cost checks for me really on it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can I just add, sorry.
No, go on. Go on, Annie.
Can I just add something, Councillor Crotch? It was just with regards to the second option. I just wanted so that members are aware that actually that second option is dependent on the environmental coordinator being in post. So although the actual work may take 3 to 6 months, obviously that post isn't yet been advertised. So realistically, that post might not be, they might not be in post until, I don't know, I'm not sure exactly when.
Okay, yeah, point taken, thank you.
Nick.
Yes.
Thank you. Just to reassure members, clearly the appointment of the new coordinator is a really critical part of the delivery of the environmental strategy and the action plan. I have to say that over the last several weeks, you may have seen a recruitment for COVID support and advice workers, and that has, unfortunately, that has taken precedence because the window between the funding being agreed and the lockdown ending is less than a fortnight. So we've moved really, really fast, and we do know we'll have certain new teams stood up at the start of next week. And thanks not least to Tony Cook, who's on the call here, who has been heavily involved in the recruitment of those teams. So do forgive us, because we will give you confirmation of the timeline for recruiting the environmental coordinator. It just has got caught behind that necessary urgency. I hope you will bear with us for that. But we will inform you to follow on exactly what to expect in terms of recruitment timescale.
Right. Thank you, Nick, for that clarification. John Fisher.
Hi, thanks, Chairman. Really, I just really comment and opinion. When you talk about the difference between trees, whether we should go for fast-growing ones to carbon capture, this sort of thing, and then I think Ken referred to native trees and this sort of thing. I think it certainly wouldn't propose that we go anywhere near eucalyptus for all sorts of reasons with the leaves, even if they are pretty fast growing. And then you've got the issue with exactly what is a native tree. But I think we need to take, simple answer, we need to take account of all three issues, I believe. And if we're planting what I would call a start of the forest, then you can then incorporate, I suspect, all of those different varieties within that planting scheme, because you need some that grow fast to start with to protect the slower growers and this sort of things. It really depends on the other hand, if we're looking at just an individual tree to go in a park, to go in a particular new development, and that brings me to the developers with the latest idea of getting management companies to take over the utilities, or some of the utilities like the street lamp and this sort of thing. So, and hence developers setting up a management company to run and look after development. I think that sort of arrangement lends itself, I believe, to working with that management company, because you've then got the residents involved, you've got the regular supply of income provided to that management company from the residents, and you've got the interest where if anything happens to the tree, they're going to be keen to say let's replant, let's replace it. And I think that's one of the issues that need to be taken account of. If we're planting a forest of 500, fine, we might have to lose a few, but if we're planting 2 or 3 what I would call standard trees, parkland trees, then they need to be replaced if something happens to them. And so there's a lot of background work, I believe, needs to go into this, and thought needs to go into this before we come up with any specific ideas forward, I think. But I mean, I think if we can include the community, if we can include the likes of scout groups as well, certainly I think we need to include any environmental groups so that they have a buy-in to the scheme as well. And certainly schools. I mean, schools are keen, although I'm not sure exactly whether Norfolk County Council million trees will be including schools. But as in some parish councils have got a fair bit of land within the remit, and I suspect if we work with parish councils and we provide the trees, they would then work with us to plant them and maintain and look after them. So I think if it's going to work, I believe we need to be very much community focused, working with tree wardens, working with management companies, working with parish councils, because that then involves the whole community. And I think that's where you're getting the buy-in, rather than just broad and saying, okay, we're going to the idea of buying some land and sticking 1,000 trees on it is fine, but I would like to see at least some of those 130,000 trees part of the community, so the community can benefit from that investment as well. And that's really what all I've got to comment on the trees so far. Thank you.
Thanks, John. And Karen, I think it was the last one.
Hi, thank you. And just to say thank you, Annie and Abigail, for a great report. Really helpful and useful. A couple of things, really. I suppose first point is really, I suppose, if we can also keep an eye on the tree loss, which sounds a bit negative, but if we're committing ourselves to planting 130,000 trees, but we've actually lost 100,000 or 10,000, 50,000, then you don't have your full 130,000. So it's just that balance, really. And I think that's that then speaks to kind of everyone else's other comments on replacement. But it's just being aware of that balance of replanting as opposed to replacing, or the tree loss, and some of that tree loss will be necessary, and some of it will be accidental due to storms, etc. So that's one point. Sorry.
Can I just say on that, Councillor Lawrence, so we would look for with developers, because we've talked about this point specifically, with developers, obviously it would have to be a net gain. Yeah, brilliant. So yeah,
perfect, lovely. No, that's lovely. Secondly, in terms of whether it's either or sort of developers or this or that, it would be really great to see sort of I suppose a mosaic approach, or kind of Broadland is so diverse in terms of different areas offering different opportunities and possibilities. And I think, and I know that will come out when you've got the sort of officer to focus on the strategy a bit more, to give us a spatial sense of where those opportunities lie, in particular which places. I wouldn't want to close the door on any option, because I think they've all got in particular, depending upon the ward's characteristics, they might have a possibility. So if we can keep as many options open as possible, that would be really great in terms of, you know, and even corporate sponsorship. So I know that Sainsbury's actually paid for some of the trees when London did something with the Woodland Trust, so that people signed up on the website and they got scented, and then you planted the tree. So that's also an option that could, although I'm not sure that sort of necessarily the biggest cost is, again, just the buying of the tree. And then in terms of kind of what kind of trees would we go for, I think if it's the adage of the right tree in the right place. You know, and that being the guiding principle. But I'd also like to see sort of heritage species come in there if it's possible, because I know sort of the tree wardens had just this amazing list of and that might be more in the fruit trees, but I think even beyond, there is an opportunity to have almost kind of a little bit of a heritage pocket within some of the planting options, whether it's a school or whether, you know, a group or a developer, but that have that option that it also gives people a linkage to that they're making a contribution to history, as well as, you know, living history, not just kind of an environmental history. That would be fantastic too. And I suppose, yeah, the right tree in the right place being critical for me, in terms of, I think that biodiversity is going to be really important, but there may be an occasion where you just need to get a tree in as fast as possible, because, you know, it will allow and protect other, you know, other spaces to allow other trees to come through. So, you know, principle, yes, biodiversity, but right tree in the right place. That would be I.
Right, thank you, Karen. Right. I think summing up on what Adrian said was that he felt we needed some bit more guidance on which particular aspect of planting we do. And is it possible, I know you wanted our views tonight, but I'm not sure that we have enough information. Is that what, am I correct there in that summary?
Yeah, agree with you, Judy.
So, can we ask you to go away, and don't want to give you a massive bit of work, but to think about how you can present the facts to us so we can make an informed choice, taking all these things that we've had, all the points that have been made. So, all right, Nick, I'll look at you for that.
Absolutely, we can take this away for some further consideration. I think a steer on, do we start with the ambition of the number of trees, or a detailed study of where do we get all the land, where do we get all the capital, to an initial steer on which of the two options you favour at 3.5 would be really helpful to guide that further information work. And then secondly, under 3.4, if we have a general sense of a consensus in this meeting of where between the three options, carbon capture, biodiversity, or environmental action, community engagement, which could include, for example, creating strings of trees through which it's nice to walk. So community value alongside other. So if we have a sense of where would your views tend to be sitting in consensus between those options for the preferences in terms of the outcomes of tree planting. I wonder if we could get any consensus just to guide the officers. Otherwise, they'll be working up all of those options for you, and there'll be quite a bit of redundancy.
Right.
Councillor Nevins has his hand raised.
Oh, Grant.
Yeah, it's just a thought listening to that. There are elements of all three.
Yeah.
That one would want to have the community being very involved. One would could possibly have one or two pieces of land identified that you want to buy and something like that. So I would just wonder about a combination of elements of each of those.
And you could, the officers could suggest to us what proportion or percentage of those elements would be a good mixture.
Yeah, through the chair, if I may, absolutely. If we can come back to you and provide some professional officer views on what might work well in the district, given what we know, to test with you, absolutely. I wonder whether Annie can offer us any just thoughts as to the logistics of doing that for you, and if there is a most straightforward way of doing that, just to give you an indication of what will follow.
Yeah.
Put you on the spot, Annie.
Sorry, Annie.
That's okay. Well, I think what we'd probably look at is, I think we need to get a clear picture as well from Norfolk County Council about how their ambitions fit in with ours, because we have had some initial discussions with them, and at the moment they have a sort of pledge that they want the district councils to sign up to. So it'd be good to get a better idea from that, because I think that would be really useful.
Yeah, definitely.
And I mean, in some ways it makes sense to look at it almost as a third. So a third of the delivery is around carbon reduction or carbon capture. A third is around delivering biodiversity improvements, and a third is around community engagement. And I should add to that none of those things are mutually exclusive. So planting with the community doesn't mean that you can't be doing biodiversity improvement, and biodiversity doesn't mean that you're not delivering carbon capture. But I think we can try and, from this evening, we've got an idea of actually you'd like to see all of those elements integrated. So we can take that away and work on a third basis, and then progress those conversations with Norfolk County Council.
Yes, I'd like to see communities involved, because if we can get communities involved and they then to take ownership of the trees, that saves us a lot of work. And they're the people who have close interest in it, if it's within their parish.
Councillor Fisher had a question or a comment.
Yep, John.
Hi. But in fact, I think Annie just almost said exactly what I was going to say, and that was the fact we haven't rejected any of the ideas, so therefore it looks as if we're going to, or the way forward is to progress with all of them. And I think if you're looking at Norfolk County Council, I think didn't they get mentioned in the Chancellor's statement yesterday with some? I think they're one of the 5 areas in the country that are now being used as a pilot for some tree planting because of their ambition. So I and I mean the other thing is, what I was going to mention, I mean there's certain times of the year to plant trees, which is roughly now. So if we don't start planting, effectively we've got 10 months before we come to what is, am I correct in thinking the normal best time for planting is sort of October onwards. So if we're not going to make any fast decisions, we've effectively got time on our side to contact community groups, work with them before we come to the tree planting season next year.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good point. Right. Have you got enough, Nick and Annie and Abigail? Or do you want anything else from us?
Chair, I'm seeing a nod of agreement from Abigail, And I know that Annie has given us her forward thoughts as to where we go after this as well. So absolutely, we can take this away and look to come back. You have given us a steer, some equal contributions in for the tree planting. Absolutely, and if I might, in relation to the first two options that we offered at paragraph, I would just turn over, wouldn't I? Paragraph 3.5 in the report.
Yeah.
I think we identify that option 1 provides a much more resource efficient way of getting into some of the tree planting firm proposals for you. That's a quick way in, but of course, giving equal consideration to the more substantive side. Can we find larger sites? Are there policy mechanisms to get trees planted? So thank you. We will take this away and come back to feedback to you.
Right, fine. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Abigail, and thank you, Annie. Right. Moving on. We've got a forward work programme. Yeah. Any comments on that? Anybody? No? And presumably the procurement exercise is on target, on timetable and all the rest of it?
I'll give you a quick update if you want.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
Somewhere,
sorry,
Simon.
sorry. I should have just said it on your work program. You have the MRF recycling facility coming back in January. Yeah. There is a report going to Norfolk leaders in December that may impact upon that timeline. It may push the timeline back a little bit, but I'll be able to report in January, obviously. With regard to the procurement exercise, yes, the overdue notice will be issued on Monday, and the potential bidders will have until January 4th of January to submit what's called their SQ submission, which is basically just a supplier questionnaire to show that they're able to fulfill the contract. We will come back in January, as you see on your work programme, with the proposals as to which of the bidders, assuming that we get 5 bidders, which bidders you may wish to take through to the next stage for the full, for them to submit the full bids. We are also planning to hold a all-member briefing in December, an online all-member briefing, just to bring all the members up to speed on what is taking place with regard to the procurement exercise and some of the key aspects that are within the proposals for the procurement. So we are on timeline. Yep, we're on track.
Fine, thank you. Now, before we move on to the second half of the meeting, we've got to do the exempt minutes. So I've got to read out. This is not for publication by virtue of Schedule 12A of Part 1, Paragraph 3 of the Local Government Act 1972, as amended by order of the Local Authorities Access to Information Variation Order 2006, contains information relating to the financial or business affairs of any particular person, including